Imagine a country totally closed off for, what, centuries?
Pretty much sealed tight.
And then almost overnight, it feels like, it just bursts onto the world scene,
Mm-hmm.
becomes this modern powerhouse, and influenced by some really surprising global players, too.
It's an incredible pivot, isn't it? The speed and the sheer depth of the transformation are just astounding. It completely reshaped Japan's identity and its global standing.
Absolutely. So today, that's what we're diving into. The life and, frankly, the monumental impact of Emperor Meiji of Japan. Our sources really dig into how this young ruler, he was just a teenager, right?
Yeah, ascended the throne at 14.
Became the catalyst for this total overhaul, the Meiji Restoration, basically shaping Japan into the nation, that we recognize today.
And we'll unpack the challenges, the unique context Japan faced, and some fascinating details, everything from foreign policy shifts to, well, clothing choices.
Right, even down to what you might eat on your next trip there.
Exactly. It's a powerful story about national reinvention. We're drawing on quite a range of historical accounts, expert analyses, to really get under the skin of this era.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Japan's suddenly facing these external threats. And the idea of leadership itself is changing. Now, when we think emperor, maybe like Napoleon.
Right, you think conquest, vast empire.
Yeah. But the Japanese title, Tenno, it had a different history, didn't it?
It really did. The Tenno title existed long before Japan engaged in that kind of territorial expansion we associate with Western empires.
So what was its purpose then?
It was more about asserting Japan's own status, its own greatness, especially in relation to China, which saw itself as the center of the universe, effectively.
Okay, like saying we're an empire too, on our own terms.
Precisely. Japan's period of, let's call it Western-style imperialism, expanding into Manchuria, Korea, Taiwan, that came much, much later, mostly in the Showa era, leading up to World War II.
Got it. So, a symbolic claim. And before all this upheaval, Japan was in the Edo period. Deep isolation. What did that actually look like on the ground?
Well, for hundreds of years, Japan was almost entirely cut off. Foreign interaction was incredibly restricted.
Just that one port, right?
Just Nagasaki, way down on the southern island of Kyushu. And even there, only the Dutch, and for a time, the Portuguese were allowed. And they were fiercely competing for that limited access.
Wow. And during that long, quiet period, the emperor himself, his role was very different from what Meiji's would become.
Hugely different. That's a key point. Before Meiji, the emperor was largely a symbolic figure. Cultural duties,
Like what, specifically?
Composing poetry, studying classical texts, important but not political governance. That power, it rested firmly with the shogun, the military dictator, and the powerful regional lords, the daimyo. They ran the country.
So this very stable, very isolated system couldn't hold forever. Other Asian countries were feeling the pressure from Western powers, right? Britain, France.
Oh, yeah. The fear of colonization was very real across Asia. And Japan was watching this unfold.
And then, kind of out of left field, the United States enters the picture.
Right. The U.S. saw Japan differently, perhaps, as an unexploited opportunity separate from where the British and French were already heavily involved.
Japan tried to stick to its guns, refuse entry. But the U.S. wasn't taking no for an answer.
Not quite. Their response was pretty forceful. They sent the Kurofune, the black ships.
These weren't traditional ships, were they?
No. These were modern, iron-hulled, steam-powered warships. Imagine the contrast with Japan's wooden sailing vessels. They looked, well, demonic to some Japanese observers.
And they didn't just sail by.
No, they blockaded the bay near the capital,
Okay.
essentially forced the government, the Baku, the shogun's government, to the negotiating table.
So this external shock, combined with problems Japan was already having internally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Baku was struggling. This pressure cooker situation led to this pivotal idea: consolidate power, restore authority back to the emperor.
Why the emperor?
The thinking was that a unified nation under the symbolic head of state might be stronger, more stable, better able to face these foreign threats.
Interesting. So external pressure forces an internal power shift. Now, Meiji's father, Emperor Komei, he wasn't exactly keen on opening up, was he?
No, he was quite conservative, very reluctant. And that made him a bit of a roadblock, caught between the Bakuhu, who increasingly saw the need to engage, and the conservative daimyo, who wanted to maintain isolation.
And then he died suddenly.
Yes, at just 36. Officially, it was smallpox. But, well, the timing was convenient for those pushing for change, let's say.
Rumors of assassination.
Persistent rumors, yes, that he was removed to clear the path for modernization. And that opened the door for his young son, Prince Mitsuhito, to become Emperor Meiji at only 14.
And Meiji's own background was unusual for an emperor to be.
Very unusual. He wasn't born to the empress or even a high-ranking consort. His mother was a lady-in-waiting, a commoner by palace standards.
So he didn't initially have that top-tier princely status.
No, not like a cha-fa in the Thai system, for example. But Emperor Komei's other children, those born to higher-ranking consorts, they all died young.
Wow. So Mitsuhito, this second son from a commoner background, became the heir by default.
Pretty much. To legitimize his position fully, he was formally adopted by the empress consort.
And his biological mother, she stayed involved.
Oh, yes. Apparently, she was quite strict, a real disciplinarian. She had a huge influence on his education, especially things like calligraphy and traditional poetry, the uta.
Which was still a big deal for royalty.
Absolutely vital. Even today, the imperial family presents uta poems publicly each year. It's a core part of the tradition she instilled in him.
Okay, so the stage is set. A young, unusually backgrounded emperor ascends the throne amidst massive pressure. And the changes start right at the top, with him and Empress Shokin.
Yes, their relationship itself seems quite modern for the time. She was actually 3 years older, and it was an arranged marriage, of course.
But they worked well together.
Sources suggest they were very supportive of each other. There's even this charming detail. Meiji apparently gave her a nickname, Tengu.
A tengu, like the long-nosed mythical creature.
Exactly. It suggests a certain closeness, maybe even a playful side to him.
And their personal lives became incredibly public symbols of this shift.
Dramatically so. They both underwent a complete physical transformation, cut their traditional top knots and hairstyles, adopted Western clothing full-time.
Full Western dress.
Yeah.
Like suits and gowns.
Completely. Empress Shokin really embraced it. Corsets, crinolines, the elaborate European hairstyles of the era. It was a very conscious statement.
What was the statement?
It was signaling to the West, we are civilized, we are modern, we belong at the table with you. It was visual diplomacy.
And this wasn't just about their personal wardrobes. There was a whole strategy around this, the Rokumaikan era.
Precisely. The Rokumaikan, the Deer Cry Pavilion, was built specifically for this, a grand Western-style building.
For what purpose?
It was essentially a social club, a stage for political dramaturgy, as some historians call it. Japanese nobles and foreign diplomats would gather there for Western-style balls, dinners, parties.
So the Japanese aristocracy had to learn, what, ballroom dancing?
Yeah.
Western etiquette.
Everything. How to waltz, how to use forks and knives correctly, even eating things like beef and drinking milk, which were not common or were even taboo before.
That must have been a huge adjustment. I mean, learning the waltz.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine these samurai lords suddenly having to navigate formal dances. It shows the lengths they went to project this image.
Was everyone in Japan on board with this?
Not at all. There was definitely pushback. Political cartoons at the time often mocked what they saw as over-Westernization. People felt maybe they were losing their identity.
But it had an impact beyond Japan, too.
It did. This drive to modernize, to adopt Western ways was noticed. It even influenced other Asian nations. You had Japanese educators, for instance, like Yasui Tetsu, an English-educated mathematician, teaching abroad in places like Thailand's Rajini School. So there were these subtle cross-currents.
So it was more than just surface-level changes. It was a calculated performance.
Very calculated. Political dramaturgy is the perfect term. It was about projecting power, projecting modernity. Even Emperor Meiji, who was apparently quite frugal personally, he embraced the outward symbols, appearing in Western military uniforms for official portraits, using European-style horse-drawn carriages for parades. It was all part of establishing Japan's status.
And that decision about clothing, it stuck, didn't it?
Absolutely. It set the standard. The fact that Japanese businessmen wear suits today, that's a direct line back to Meiji. And the imperial family still wears very formal Western attire, tailcoats, top hats, gloves for state occasions. It's a lasting symbol. Japan is part of the modern, civilized world order.
Okay, so appearance was one thing. But Meiji also pushed this idea of Japan as a unified nation-state. That was new too, wasn't it?
Yes, the concept itself defined borders, a single national identity overriding feudal loyalties that was largely a Western import. Meiji and his government actively promoted it.
How? How do you build that kind of feeling?
Through public ceremonies, new national holidays, symbols, and critically, through education.
Right, you mentioned his scholarly side. How did education play into building nationalism?
Well, while he personally enjoyed traditional scholarship, he understood the power of the new Western-style education system they were building, primary, secondary, university levels.
So what do they teach?
They made sure to weave in ancient Japanese myths, stories from the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, the oldest chronicles, about the gods Izanagi and Izumami creating Japan.
So kids were taught that Japan was literally created by gods, the first land.
Essentially, yes, that their nation had a divine origin. It's an incredibly powerful tool for fostering national unity and pride.
But that sounds like it could have a downside too. Fostering pride is one thing, but
It's absolutely a double-edged sword, immense pride, yes. But it also nurtured a belief in Japanese uniqueness, which easily tipped into a sense of racial superiority.
and that had consequences later on.
A significant factor, many historians argue, in the lead-up to World War II, this idea of a divinely superior Yamato race. Our sources draw parallels to the kind of ideology underpinning Nazi Germany.
Wow. So what happened to that intense nationalism after the war? Did it just vanish?
It was deliberately dismantled. General MacArthur, during the U.S. occupation, oversaw major reforms. The education system was purged of emperor worship and these Shinto religious elements. Japan was established as a secular state.
And that led to a different kind of society.
Yes, contemporary Japan is generally seen as much less overtly nationalistic than it was in the pre-war period, thanks in large part to those reforms.
Okay, shifting gears slightly back to Meiji's reign. His leadership wasn't just symbolic or cultural. He oversaw a major military victory.
A huge one, the Russo-Japanese War. His leadership during that conflict was crucial.
And the significance of that win.
Monumental. It was the first time a modern Asian nation had decisively defeated a major European power ever.
That must have sent ripples everywhere.
Shockwaves. Across Asia, it was incredibly inspiring to nations under colonial rule, and Meiji himself gained immense international respect. You see condolences pouring in after his death from rulers across the Middle East Arab sheikhs, the sultans of Egypt and Turkey praising him as a truly great emperor.
But again, that double-edged sword.
Yes. This incredible victory also fueled a sense of, perhaps, Japanese invincibility, a national hubris that contributed to the overconfidence and aggression that led eventually to the Pacific War.
And you mentioned earlier there's maybe a subtle legacy of this superiority complex even today.
It's fascinating, yeah. Some sources point out this tendency, maybe unconscious, for many Japanese people to distinguish Japan from the rest of Asia.
That's so.
Like, they might talk about Asian food or Asian decor, meaning Southeast Asian or Chinese, implicitly excluding Japanese things, suggesting Japan is somehow separate or perhaps still, subtly, perceived as distinct or superior. It's a nuanced point, but indicative of how deep these historical currents can run.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it down to the everyday level. We've talked big picture politics, war, identity. What about daily life? Food, buildings. Did Meiji change those too?
Oh, massively. The Meiji era completely revolutionized Japanese cuisine. And this was different from the earlier limited influences you saw from the Portuguese in Nagasaki, like, Castella cake or those little Campedo candies.
So what kinds of things became popular?
Well, bread was introduced. Initially, it was kind of seen as a snack, not a meal staple, but that led to brilliant innovations like on-pan.
The sweet red bean bun.
Exactly. From the Kimaraya Bakery in Ginza. A perfect blend of Japanese taste, the red bean paste, with a Western food item, bread. Still hugely popular.
What else? Desserts.
Yes, things like moto pudding. Moto apparently comes from the French word modern. It's a kind of caramel custard pudding, a distinct Japanese take that emerged in Yokohama. You still find versions in convenience stores and those old-style coffee shops, kisaten.
In main dishes, curry rice comes to mind.
Curry rice, absolutely. And hayashi rice, which is like a beef stew over rice. Both became staples during or influenced by the Meiji era's opening to Western food culture.
And meat eating in general must have increased.
Dramatically. Dishes like sukiyaki, with thinly sliced beef cooked at the table, and tonkatsu, the breaded pork cutlet. These became really popular as eating beef and other large animals, which wasn't common before, became widespread.
A big change from traditional washoku, the rice, fish, miso soup meal.
A huge change, and dairy, too. Milk started being used more in cooking, and companies like Meiji Milk, named right after the era, were established.
Wow. And architecture. You mentioned the Rokomaikan, but more generally.
Big changes there, too. New materials, new styles. You started seeing lots of akarenga buildings, red brick.
Ah, like the red brick warehouses in places like Yokohama or Hakodate.
Exactly those. Red brick became a symbol of modernity, of civilization, much like the red brick universities in Britain signified a new wave of institutions.
And presumably more fire-resistant than traditional buildings.
That was a major factor. The introduction of cement was revolutionary. Before Meiji, most buildings were wood and paper, incredibly vulnerable to fire, which constantly ravaged Japanese cities. Cement offered durability, permanence, a whole new feeling for the urban landscape.
So really, Meiji's personal embrace of Western things, combined with these bigger strategies, it touched almost every aspect of life.
It really did. From the clothes people wore, to the food they ate, to the buildings they lived and worked in, his era fundamentally shaped the modern Japan you experience today.
Which brings us to a final, really fascinating, almost conspiratorial thread from our sources. A persistent rumor that the Emperor Meiji who ruled might not have been the original Prince Mutsuhito.
Yes, the Asutai Tenno theory, the emperor swap. It's a very persistent historical rumor, though definitely not mainstream history.
What's the basis for it? It sounds wild.
Well, it connects back to Emperor Komei's convenient death, remember?
Right, the rumored assassination.
The theory goes that elements wanting radical change didn't just remove Komei, they secretly swapped his young, perhaps sickly son, Mutsuhito, with another boy.
Ooh, another prince.
Supposedly a young prince from the southern court. This was a rival imperial line dating back centuries, often living in obscurity or poverty by this time. The idea was this substitute would be more robust, more suitable for leading a modernizing nation.
Okay, that's quite a claim. Is there any evidence people point to?
Proponents point to a few things. Alleged physical discrepancies. Early photos supposedly show a small, frail child, whereas the adult Meiji was tall, imposing, strong. He was also apparently left-handed, while Mutsuhito was said to be right-handed.
Could they tell back then? Handedness.
It's debatable how well documented that was. But they also point out that strict imperial customs forbade things like measuring the emperor's height or weight, which would make a swap theoretically easier to conceal.
Any other clues?
There are stories, perhaps apocryphal, of a high-ranking noble supposedly confronting Meiji later in life, threatening to reveal his original status. And there's the odd placement of a statue honoring a Southern Court loyalist general right outside the imperial palace.
And the beard. Meiji had that distinctive beard.
Right. The theory suggests the beard was grown to hide smallpox scars. Scars that the real vaccinated Prince Mutsuhito wouldn't have had, but an impoverished boy from the provinces, like a Southern Court claimant, might have contracted.
It pieces together into quite a narrative. What do actual historians make of it?
Overwhelmingly, professional historians dismiss it. They argue the photographic evidence likely involves misidentified pictures of different children. And the written records supporting the swap often come from sources with a vested interest, like people claiming Southern Court ancestry themselves, trying to elevate their own family's historical importance.
So it's likely more legend than reality.
That's the academic consensus, yes. But it has that persistent allure, doesn't it? Like the mysteries surrounding Princess Anastasia or Richard III. These secret histories capture the imagination even without solid proof.
They really do. It adds another layer of intrigue.
Absolutely. The narrative is just too compelling for some to let go of.
Well, whether he was the original article or a substitute, Emperor Meiji's impact is undeniable. The transformation he oversaw was just colossal.
Completely. Regardless of these rumors, his reign fundamentally reshaped Japan.
So as you go about your day, maybe think about that.
Yeah.
Or if you find yourself in Japan, look around. You can see the legacies of the Meiji era everywhere. The architecture, the food, even the very idea of Japan as a modern nation. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe inspires you to look even deeper into this incredible period.